Hello, I'm James Robinson, and this is the Extrinsic Value Blog. Today we're going to talk about my performance for the month of March 2018. So March was a tough month. The market was up and down significantly, so it was quite a grind. In terms of absolute performance, I was positive. My fund's value started the month at $9.63 a share and ended the month at $9.68 a share. So that means I had a profit for the month of about 0.5%. This changes my total performance for the year since January 1 to down 3.24%. And again, I started the month down 3.29% as of the end of February. So my negative 3.24% when annualized is now spread out over 3 months instead of 2 months. And that means that my annualized rate of return has dropped. It was negative 22.2%. Now it's negative 12.97%. But again, most of that is just because we're spreading the loss over a longer period of time, 2 months versus 3 months. But, you take your victories where you can find them. For the month, I remained invested about 85%, 15% in cash. The good news is, in terms of looking at your performance against the benchmark, the S&P 500 was down 2.02% for the month, and for the year is now down 1.36%. So for the month of March, we were able to outperform the S&P 500 by 2.6%, and for the year, we're only trailing it now by 1.6%. Position reports. So this was a mediocre month in terms of my positions. At different points during the month, I had two different positions flirt with the 15% appreciation required to convert them from a long-term holding to a long-term holding from a short-term holding, but they never quite got there. To recap, I try to own 15 stocks in my active portfolio. When any of those stocks go up 15% from the purchase price, I sell my original investment and transfer the profits from active to long-term holds. To be clear, it is not up 15% of the month that matters, but it's 15% since I purchased it. To the left, you can see my active positions and their portion of the portfolio. Position reports. So I had no new stocks to report this month because none of my existing stocks passed the threshold to become long-term holdings. At the end of the month, there were still 9 positions in my permanent holding portion of my portfolio. You can see those stocks and their percentage of the portfolio. Long story short, they accounted for about 7.7% of my holdings. In terms of cash on hand, over the course of the month, I did not add additional cash to the portfolio in the form of additional investments. So the number of shares that I own in my fund stayed constant. 6 stocks paid a dividend in the month, and the amount was negligible in terms of cash on hand, equating to just 0.146% of the funds on hand. I made no additional deposits, had no trades, and had negligible dividend cash income, so that my cash position increased by 0.2%. For all intents and purposes, my cash on hand remained constant. Again, my goal is to be virtually 100% in cash, and I plan to achieve that goal during the month of April. Research. It may seem counterintuitive, but I don't consider the act of buying and selling stocks to be what I'm trying to do here. Really, that's just a byproduct. What I do is to try and research and evaluate the fundamental attributes of companies. If I do that well, buying and selling stocks takes care of itself. My goal is to analyze 3 stocks per day. That may seem like a lot, but it really isn't that much at all. Remember that something like 80% of the companies I look at have so little appeal, I'm able to tell in just a few minutes it is a dog and move on. I'm looking for really solid companies, at least in terms of past performance. They're pretty easy to identify if you just do the homework. In March, I analyzed 111 companies, which is 3.17 companies per day. Of those 111 companies, I found 18 which I would buy if the price were right. That is to say they were solid companies. I would like to own them for the long term. That means just 16.2% of this month's stocks met our standards. Of those 18 stocks, 4 were also cheap enough for me to be interested in buying them. Annual total or research total so far, I've been actively working out using this investment model for 34 weeks as of the end of March. To date, I've analyzed 692 companies. That works out to 3.18 stocks per day. 127 of those stocks were found to be solid companies, which is about 18.35%. Of those companies, 29 are cheap enough to consider buying at today's prices. This is surprising, as last month 30 companies were cheap enough. So even though I added 18 great companies and the market went down, the number of great investments actually declined. As it stands today, 4.1% of the companies researched are attractive in terms of both fundamentals and price. So, in summary, my stocks were up, my investments were up slightly for the month. We outperformed the S&P 500 by 2.6%. No company passed the 15% appreciation threshold and became a long-term investment. No new companies were added, giving me 15 stocks in the active fund. Cash remained basically unchanged at 15% of assets. We researched 111 new companies, found 18 solid firms to track, found 4 stocks cheap enough to warrant further investment and research. And that's the summary for March of 2018. Thank you very much.